You know that feeling when someone who pulled away suddenly starts watching your stories again. They start liking old posts, or you hear through the grapevine that they've been asking about you, and you think, wait a second, you were the one who ran away. Why are you acting so interested now? Let's talk about why that happens. Avoidant people, those who crave connection but fear it at the same time, live in a cycle of push and pull. When they're close, it feels overwhelming. When they're far, it feels safe. But once you step back, once you stop chasing, something shifts. The silence becomes louder than your presence ever was. See, when you go no contact, you create space, and that space forces them to confront what they've been avoiding, their own feelings. While you were available, they could rationalize everything. I'm not ready. They're too emotional. I just need time. But when you're gone, there's nothing left to rationalize. The mind starts replaying the warmth, the laughter, the safety, everything they thought they didn't need. Avoidants are addicted to what they can't control. When you were accessible, they could control the narrative. But when you pull away with dignity without games, suddenly you become the one thing they can't predict. And that's intoxicating. But here's what you need to understand: their addiction after no contact doesn't mean they've changed. It doesn't mean they're ready for emotional intimacy. It just means they're feeling the loss of your energy, your presence, your care. And for the first time, they realize how powerful that was. That's why it's so important not to break your no contact just because they start sniffing around again. Because what they're missing isn't necessarily you, it's the version of themselves that felt desired when you were giving them attention. They're chasing that feeling, not necessarily the relationship. So, your power lies in staying grounded. You don't need to punish them. You don't need to prove a point. Just keep focusing on yourself, on your peace, on your glow. Because the more centered you are, the more magnetic you become. The truth is, avoidants become addicted after no contact because, for once, they're forced to experience the absence of unconditional acceptance. You stop being their emotional safety net, and that shakes them. But that's not your job anymore. Your job is to live in such a way that you feel whole with or without their attention. And the irony, that's when real attraction happens, not from need but from strength. Not from chasing, but from self-worth. When you go no contact with an avoidant, something powerful begins to happen, not just for them, but for you too. The silence, the absence, the space you created isn't just about cutting communication. It's about reclaiming clarity. Avoidants thrive in relationships that allow them to stay slightly detached. They want connection, but only on terms that don't threaten their emotional independence. When you're constantly available, constantly reaching out, or trying to fix the distance, they never have to face the consequences of their avoidance. They get to stay in control, comfortable in their narrative that they need space or time. But when you go quiet, when you pull back and stop feeding that dynamic, you remove the buffer that protects them from self-awareness. No contact removes the noise of reaction. The energy they used to receive from you, your texts, your concern, your emotional warmth, all of that suddenly disappears. It's like turning off the music they were dancing to without even realizing it. At first, they may feel relief. The pressure is gone. They can breathe. But as time passes, relief turns into restlessness. That's when clarity begins to seep in. The quiet becomes uncomfortable because it's no longer filled with reassurance. And now, they start hearing their own thoughts louder than ever, the doubts, the regrets, the memories of connection that they pushed away. Distance does something remarkable to an avoidant. It removes their ability to project their discomfort onto you. When you were present, it was easy for them to say, "You're too much," or "I'm not ready for this." Your closeness became their excuse to run. But when you're gone, there's no one left to blame. That emotional mirror they avoided now reflects only themselves. And for many avoidants, that's a deeply unsettling experience. They start wondering whether their fears were justified or whether they've pushed away something meaningful yet again. This period of separation also exposes the emotional contrast. They begin to realize that the peace they thought they wanted doesn't feel as peaceful without you in it. The quiet doesn't feel calm anymore, it feels empty. That emptiness is what forces them to think, often for the first time, about the emotional bond they had and how much of it was sustained by your effort. They start to remember not just moments, but feelings, your laughter, your empathy, your consistency, and those feelings start to stand out against the dullness of solitude. In that stillness, they begin to miss what they didn't appreciate before. Distance creates the mental and emotional space necessary for perspective. What once felt suffocating begins to feel irreplaceable. It's a strange reversal. The very closeness they once resisted becomes the connection they long for. That's why no contact isn't about manipulation or revenge. It's about truth. It allows reality to surface without interference. When you step away, both people get to see the relationship clearly. You see how much you were giving, and they see what they took for granted. That is the true power of distance. It reveals what words and effort never could. Avoidants find comfort in control. Control allows them to manage how close someone gets, how vulnerable they feel, and how much of themselves they're willing to share. When they can predict your responses, when they know you'll text first, when they sense you'll forgive quickly, when they're certain you'll wait, they feel safe. Not emotionally intimate, but safe in their ability to maintain distance. It's not that they don't care. It's that they fear the loss of independence and the vulnerability that comes with emotional closeness. Control keeps them calm, and predictability feeds that sense of emotional stability. But when you go no contact, when you suddenly step out of the dance, everything changes. Your silence isn't just the absence of communication. It's a disruption of their entire emotional rhythm. They can't read you anymore. They can't rely on your presence to soothe their insecurities or confirm their importance. The moment you stop reacting, their sense of control begins to slip away, and that's when curiosity and anxiety creep in. They start to wonder what's happening in your world, what made you stop reaching out, and most importantly, whether you've moved on. Your quietness becomes a mystery, and avoidance, though they fear intimacy, are deeply drawn to what they can't predict. When they could anticipate your every move, you were emotionally safe to them, not because you wouldn't hurt them, but because they knew how to handle the dynamic. They had the power to step in and out as they pleased. However, when that predictable pattern is broken, it triggers something deeper. Humans, even avoidants, crave significance. They want to know they mattered. When your silence removes that reassurance, they begin to feel the discomfort of uncertainty. Did they lose something valuable? Did they push too far? Have they been replaced? Suddenly the tables turn. You, the once predictable one, become the one in control. The brilliance of silence is that it forces them to confront the emotional consequences of their own behavior without you having to say a word. Every unanswered message, every day that passes without a sign from you, becomes a mirror reflecting back their avoidance. For the first time, they are no longer in charge of the emotional tempo. That loss of control awakens their interest, even their obsession, because now they're the ones wondering, analyzing, overthinking all the things you used to do. The unpredictability of your absence can feel both threatening and magnetic to them. It unsettles their ego but intrigues their heart. Suddenly, you're no longer a constant. You're a question mark, and nothing draws an avoidant more than curiosity mixed with loss. The silence you hold is not passive. It's power disguised as peace. You are no longer giving them emotional fuel to control. Instead, they are left to feel the weight of their choices. In that stillness, the balance shifts. You stop chasing, and they start noticing. Your quiet detachment, once seen as weakness, becomes the very thing that breaks their emotional control, and in that loss of control, their addiction to you begins. When an avoidant comes back after a period of no contact, it's easy to think it's a sign of change, a sign that they've finally realized your value, or that they're ready to build something meaningful. but in most cases, that's not what's happening. Their return isn't necessarily a reflection of emotional growth. It's often a reaction to discomfort, the discomfort of losing the attention, care, and validation they once received from you. Avoidants are experts at managing closeness and distance, but when you take your energy away, they start to feel the void that used to be filled by your consistency. That void doesn't automatically awaken maturity, it awakens craving. And craving is not the same as commitment. Their return after no contact can be confusing because it feels sincere. They might say the right things, reach out with warmth, or even express regret. But what they're often responding to is the emotional withdrawal, the silence that left them unsettled. They may miss the comfort of your understanding, your patience, or the way you made them feel important without pressuring them to open up fully. It's not always about missing you as a partner in the deepest emotional sense. It's about missing the stability you provided while allowing them to stay emotionally guarded. The moment you're gone, that safety net disappears, and it triggers their instinct to reclaim what once made them feel secure. However, this return doesn't mean they're ready to handle true emotional intimacy. Many avoidants come back because the silence is uncomfortable, not because they've learned to be vulnerable. They want relief, not necessarily growth. They want the emotional balance back, the one where they could receive care without having to reciprocate at the same depth. And if you respond too quickly or fall back into old dynamics, that comfort returns and the cycle begins again. That's why it's so crucial to see their reappearance for what it often is, a temporary response to emotional deprivation, not a long-term transformation. True change requires self-awareness, time, and emotional accountability. An avoidant has to reach a point where they recognize their own fear of intimacy and decide to work on it, not just miss you, but miss what real connection feels like and be willing to face the vulnerability that comes with it. Without that inner work, their return will likely be short-lived. They may come close, feel overwhelmed again, and retreat, leaving you right back where you started. Understanding this pattern helps you step out of the emotional loop. When they come back, you can observe instead of react. You can listen without surrendering your boundaries. You can recognize that their words might be driven by temporary discomfort rather than genuine readiness. And that awareness keeps you from confusing attention with intention. Their return is not always a promise. Sometimes it's just an echo of what they lost. The true test isn't whether they come back, it's whether they can stay when closeness becomes real again. What an avoidant often becomes addicted to after no contact isn't necessarily you as a person, it's the way they felt when they were around you. Your energy was the emotional environment that made them feel safe without demanding too much. You were patient, understanding, and emotionally available in ways they couldn't be. You gave warmth where they offered distance, reassurance where they offered silence. That energy created a sense of security and significance for them, even if they couldn't fully acknowledge it at the time. When that energy is suddenly gone, they start to feel its absence like withdrawal from a drug. It's not that they consciously decide they want you back. It's that they can't find that same emotional experience anywhere else. Avoidants are drawn to emotional connection, but are afraid of being consumed by it. When they find someone who makes them feel understood without judgment, it's intoxicating. You likely provided a balance they didn't know. They needed someone who could love deeply, but still make them feel accepted for who they are. They might not have appreciated that when they had it, but once you go silent, that emotional contrast becomes undeniable. The everyday moments they used to take for granted, your check-ins, your laughter, your empathy suddenly echo in their memory. They start missing the feeling of being emotionally anchored, even though they once resisted it. Your energy was the emotional fuel that kept them feeling connected without having to do the inner work themselves. It gave them the illusion of intimacy without requiring vulnerability, but when you step away, that illusion fades. The energy that kept them emotionally stable is no longer available. They can't replace it with casual attention or superficial flings, because what they miss isn't the interaction itself, it's the emotional safety you represented. They start to realize that the calm they felt around you wasn't accidental. It was the result of your emotional presence, your empathy, your consistency. That's what becomes addictive. And because avoidants struggle with emotional regulation, they can't easily process this loss. They don't know how to sit with discomfort, so instead of reflecting, they're drawn back to what feels familiar you. Not necessarily because they're ready to love fully, but because they want that soothing energy again. They crave the stability you provided, but they're still afraid of the vulnerability that comes with maintaining it. This creates an emotional tug-of-war inside them, the desire to return to the warmth they miss and the fear of being too exposed. That's why your energy becomes both their comfort and their conflict. They want the feeling but fear the closeness required to sustain it. It's a cycle that keeps repeating until you step out of it for good. When you no longer provide that energy, you force them to confront their own emotional emptiness, to realize that the peace they once felt didn't come from control, but from your presence. That's when they understand that what they are addicted to isn't love. It's the version of themselves that only existed in your light. True power in relationships doesn't come from convincing someone to choose you or chasing after their attention. It comes from peaceful detachment. When you reach a point where you no longer need validation from the person who once made you feel unseen, something inside you shifts. That shift isn't loud or dramatic. It's calm, centered, and steady. It's the kind of strength that comes when you stop trying to control outcomes and instead focus on your own sense of worth. For someone with avoidant tendencies, that change in energy is magnetic because it removes the dynamic they were used to, the one where you were emotionally dependent on their approval. When you stop reacting, stop chasing, and start living in peace, you no longer play the role they expected. That unpredictability creates curiosity, and that curiosity often reignites their attraction. Peaceful detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you choose not to let your emotions be dictated by someone else's inconsistency. You learn to sit with discomfort without reaching out, to find joy without needing their presence, and to rebuild your identity outside of the relationship. Avoidants often fear emotional engulfment. They pull away when they sense that someone's happiness depends on them. So, when you detach peacefully, it disarms that fear. You're no longer a source of pressure. You become a source of strength. You no longer represent emotional demand, but emotional independence, and that, to them, feels incredibly attractive. Ironically, the moment you stop needing their attention is when they begin to crave yours. The energy has reversed. When you were anxious, they felt in control. When you are calm, they feel uncertain. Your silence, your composure, and your self-assurance unsettle them because it means they've lost emotional influence. They start to wonder if they've lost you for good, and that uncertainty makes them think about you in ways they didn't before. It's not about playing games, it's about standing in yourself, worth so firmly that you no longer have to fight for someone's recognition. That's where your power lies, in your ability to remain centered even when they try to pull you back into the old emotional cycle. Detachment is a form of emotional freedom. It allows you to stop reacting to their push and pull and start responding to your own needs. It teaches you to protect your peace above all else. The more grounded you become, the more naturally confident you appear. You stop chasing closure because you already have it within yourself. You stop waiting for an apology because you've learned to validate your own feelings. That's what peaceful detachment looks like, quiet strength that speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. And for the avoidant, that calm independence is both confusing and captivating. They're drawn to what they can't control, and your serenity becomes the very thing they can't shake off. When you no longer chase, they begin to remember why they were drawn to you in the first place: your warmth, your depth, your self-assured energy. Only now it's amplified by your boundaries. Peaceful detachment is not about punishing them, it's about freeing yourself. And that freedom, that self-possession, is what makes you truly unforgettable. In the end, understanding why avoidants become addicted after no contact isn't about blaming or labeling them. It's about reclaiming your own power. The moment you stop chasing and start choosing yourself, everything changes. You no longer live in reaction to someone's fear of closeness. You live from your own sense of peace and worth. Growth happens in that quiet strength, in the decision to let go with grace instead of clinging with fear. So if this message has reminded you of your value, take it as a gentle nudge to keep walking forward, not backward. Thank you for listening, for opening your heart to reflection, and for choosing your own healing above all else.